Derato, it's yours.
All right, good afternoon / good evening to everyone, and welcome to our third Real Chat with ADIFF. Today we will be having three South African filmmakers today. We have Adrian Van Wyk and Jaki here, and we will be joined soon by Maake as well. My name is Loretta Bukako. I am one of the organizers of the African Diaspora International Film Festival. I am also the co-curator of the South African Spotlight on South African Cinema program this year. And today we're joined by 3 of the 15 films that are in the program. I will start off by asking everyone to introduce themselves, please. Can Diara please start?
Hi, my name is Diara Spesh. I'm the co-director and co-founder of the African Diaspora International Film Festival, and I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Hi, everybody. My name is Imani. I'm also one of the organizers of the festival. Thank y'all for joining us. ADIFF Reel Chat is a live series of conversations between ADIFF and the featured talent in ADIFF New York 2023. Thank y'all for being here. We want this to be like a conversation. So if anyone wants to ask a question, feel free to use the Zoom feature and raise your hand. But if you see that there isn't much traction going on, feel free to jump in.
Shall I introduce myself as well? Okay, hi, I'm Julia Jaki. I'm the director of DORPIE, a documentary that's been selected for this year's ADIFF. It features a South African activist, Lana O'Neill, and yeah, I'm very excited to be part of this conversation today.
Peace and power, everybody. My name is Adrian Van Wyk. I'm the producer of What the Soil Remembers. It's a short documentary that's been selected this year for ADIFF. Thank you so much for selecting it as well, and to be here with you. It's really great to be in conversation with you. And our film takes place in the town of Stellenbosch, and it makes much connection to the after and the ramifications of colonial spatial planning. So thank you again for having me. I'm also here on behalf of our director, Jose Cardoso, couldn't make it, and he sends his greetings as well. So thank you again for having us.
I'd like to start us off by asking the first question to Julia. I was at the screening at Encounters in Cape Town where the film received a standing ovation, and the audience also erupted in song, which was really, as an audience member, very overwhelming to witness. I can only imagine for you. Can you talk to us about just the audience responses that you've been getting from South Africa, as well as through international screenings, and what are some of your takeaways from screening?
Yeah, so the film premiered at IDFA last year, and which was obviously very exciting. I mean, I'm a first-time feature documentary filmmaker, and I mean, I wasn't really aware of what a big deal that is. So that was really exciting. But I think the screening we were most looking forward to, and we were most excited and anxious about, myself and also Lana, my protagonist, was the premiere in South Africa at Encounters. And we were both quite nervous. I was nervous, because I'm obviously, I've been living in South Africa for a while, but I mean, I'm of German origin, I'm a German person, so I was nervous about audience reactions. I think Lana was also a bit nervous how people, will see her role and what she's doing. It's just a weird feeling seeing yourself on the big screen in your home country. And I was just moved. It was beyond, what I expected. At first, I was concerned that the cinema is not going to be sold out. So I didn't want to be embarrassing for Lana. Then it was like sold out. That was fantastic. And then we had scene applause. People were booing and people were clapping, and that was fantastic. And then when the film ended, as you said, there were standing ovations. And some women, also activists who were in the audience, started singing a struggle song, Sensenina, What Have We Done? And I think, we all just started crying. And for me, it was just important also for Lana to have that moment and just have her on the audience, on the stage, and just receive the applause. And I kind of tried to take myself out of that as much as possible. And just to answer your question briefly, so far the audience reactions have been wonderful. But I think definitely Cape Town was a highlight, and I think it just hits home for local audiences. It's different showing the film overseas than showing it in South Africa. Also to an audience that obviously understands Afrikaans and understands all the little nuances in speech, and yeah.
Julia, for the folks who are with us who have not seen the film or don't know anything about it, can you tell us a little bit who Lana is and what the story is about?
Yeah, okay, sure. So Lana O'Neill is a community worker in a small town of Bredasdorp at the southernmost tip of South Africa. It's a small town, and she's an independent community worker and female activist, and she runs the only safe house for abused women in the region. And Bredasdorp has been in the media in recent years because since 2013, 5 women have been raped and murdered there. Which is unfortunately not an exception, because there's many towns, many places in South Africa where this is an issue, but Bredasdorp has been in the media repeatedly, and she's been running the safe house there, and I've been following her for 5 years and just trying to capture her work. And you can just see that she's really struggling against the tide. She doesn't get much funding. The local community doesn't really support her. Bredasdorp is like many South African towns, like cut in half. You have the town where predominantly white population lives, and you have an area where the people of color live, and the poorer part of the community. So it's kind of like a classic South African small town. And the title of the film, it's called DORPIE, which means small town, and it also means Bredasdorp is not unique. This scenario happens in a lot of small South African towns. But I've been following Lana, and started filming in 2016, stopped filming in 2020. And we can see throughout the film that there's several situations where she's like on the brink of giving up, but still she perseveres. Yeah.
Let us watch a little bit of the trailer, and then we'll continue the conversation.
Sure.
Bredasdorp is reeling from yet another murder of a young girl.
Sulnita Mano, gang raped, her genitals mutilated, her naked and beaten up body found displayed outside a fence in a public area.
Hallo? Niemand die? Bessie? Kom gee. Kind dat jy alleen is so. Nou, wat gebruik jy alles? Net ek en papa. You don't feel welcome in this town. I think it's because of my work. I'm here to help the vulnerable and the poor. Sheila, ek kyk agter die kind ook, nee, as ek onder die brug gaan vang, dan gaan julle weggestuur word, dan gaan ek die maatskaplike werkers hulle met julle wegstuur, en jy gaan mos Grabouw toe, as jy mors, nee? Van die brug af, daar gaan wonderlijke goed aan. Wat is er nou in petrol op? Kom.
Niks hier, Lana. De schoen.
Die jokje is die schoen nie.
Ja, daar gaan Lana.
Dis jou werkie. Die man staan staan. Ja, ruk jou reg, man. Jy is een van die oudstes hier so. People must just come together, get out of their luxury homes. But as long as the community say, it's not my problem, It's their problem. They want to be like that. We're always going to have another rape or another murder.
Yeah, so rewatching that trailer I also have a question. The last couple of months, particularly in this festival, the South African films that I've seen have brought my awareness to the problem of gender-based violence in South Africa. And in this film, in DORPIE, Lana's primary focus are the immediate victims, which are the women, right? Rightfully so, may I say, and making sure that they're equipped in the event that they have to deal with an unfortunate situation like GBV. But I was curious about whether or not you saw or you think it would be effective to have any community-based organizations that focused on the men. And I know someone towards the end of the film also touched on that as well. If there are any initiatives that could take place to start dismantling the consciousness of the young men in South Africa, like what about, gender-based violence happens everywhere, right? It's not something that I myself have not seen in America, but I want to know if there is anything, and anybody can answer this, that you think makes it specific to South Africa and the mindset of the men that are there.
I can briefly say something to that. I mean, I think what is obviously gender-based violence is not unique. I'm at the moment in Germany. We have a screening here on Sunday, and I mean it's a big issue here as well. I think the sheer number of rapes and murders in South Africa is still unusual, though, in a country that is not at war. And also, I mean, the problem is, I mean, South Africa, as you all know, is one of the most unequal societies in the world. And because of that, women, as we see in DORPIE, who are economically dependent, are especially vulnerable. And I mean, there's other countries in the world where there's the same situation, but I think this, and also South Africa's history of apartheid, and as Adrian mentioned, colonial spatial planning, which also is still visible in Bredasdorp and in many small towns, makes this also a specific South African problem. And you mentioned also the men. Just to briefly touch on that, I obviously thought about, when making that film, I thought about, okay, but what about the men? Do I need to speak to the perpetrators? There were all kinds of ideas at the beginning. And I think in the course of making the film and over the years, it was just so difficult to get that film done because I had zero funding. I didn't have a clue. It was difficult at times, getting Lana to commit to filming. And I think I just had then that idea that I just focus on her. She's such a strong character. It's also difficult to have somebody else competing with Lana on the screen. And it was, I think, just then a decision to just focus on her, give her that space. But also, it was also due to economical reasons, because I only had a limited number of shooting days. And so it was both, And somebody mentions that in the film, it was very important for me to have a scene in the film where they all have a meeting to discuss the issue. And there's one woman, and she mentions, what about the men? We also have to address the boys. And then Lana responds to her and says, yes, you're absolutely right. But there's other people out there who have to address that issue. And also when it comes to films, I think it would be great if somebody would make a film about, maybe there's a film out there I'm not aware of about, South African men. I know there's a lot of initiatives at the moment. One is, I think, even called What About the Men or What About the Boys? So there is a lot of stuff going on. And I think it would be great for a great topic for a documentary. Absolutely.
Adrian, would you like to add something about this?
No, just to echo what Julia is saying, is that the violence and the systemic violence that South Africa still endures in this attempt of being a post-apartheid society filters through. And this is the direct correlation that happens, where there's various reasons and various systemic reasons which have engineered that these conditions of gender-based violence have basically erupted. And this has been something, I mean, Bredasdorp for me is very important as well. I did some work out there, and I mean, a name that I want to say in this place is Anine Boysen, for instance. Anine Boysen is someone who was a young woman, was violently taken and really shocked a lot of South African people and shocked the world as to the violence that women's bodies have been subjected to within this post-apartheid society. So definitely there are correlations that we can make as to the violence, or the systemic violence that communities also endure, that have been marginalized, that have been relegated to the margins of remembrance, basically. And so definitely, again, I would say that name again, Anine Booysen, is a name that stands for me with the countless names of women and children that have been subjected to this violence.
Mm.
And Julia, now that the film has been done, what are the conversations that you're still having with your protagonist, and or are you still in contact with her, and has the funding improved for her safe house?
Yeah, so I think a lot of good things have come out of DORPIE so far. I'm very grateful about that. Already, like during making the movie, I think when lockdown started, we stopped filming in January 2020, and then obviously COVID happened, and Lana started a soup kitchen, outside the safe house. So she added that to her long list of tasks. And she asked for donations, and I kind of like privately through my network and my family, we started collecting donations. So that's been ongoing since 2020. And also during film screenings, we partnered with ShareDoc, which is a platform that connects documentary films and audiences so people can donate. So donations have been coming in, which is great. And we did several community screenings. We continue doing community screenings in South Africa. We finally had a screening in Bredasdorp 2 weeks ago, which was quite interesting. And we had the mayor there. The deputy mayor, who is featured in the film, doesn't deliver on promises, is unfortunately or fortunately not in office anymore, but the mayor was there, so we confronted him. Wasn't very fruitful, but at least we did it. And a lot of people came up to Lana after the screening and said they weren't aware of what she's doing in the community. They offered their help. They also offered, we had a screening last week, there was a lady there who offers self-defense classes now. She wants to volunteer her time. And I think for Lana, she, obviously follows the whole thing. Where's the film screening? How do audiences react? And I think it was quite a boost. I mean, she's a confident woman, but I think it's great to see how audiences react. And we had several screenings with her, several Q&As after our Cape Town screening. And you can just see how she not empowered, she was empowered before, but how much energy it gives her to see how when people tell her, hey, you're so inspiring, because she's fighting against windmills in her own town and everybody's just talking about Lana, Lana, Lana. Now, I think it's great to see that. And she's on a plane at the moment with her family, and she's going to arrive in Germany tomorrow, and she's going to attend the screening in my hometown in Stuttgart. I was just busy with a sign here because I'm going to pick her up from the airport tomorrow, and we're going to screen DORPIE in Stuttgart, and she's going to be there. She's going to meet a lot of people who donated to the safe house, and I hope that's going to be, a good experience. I'm looking forward to that. Yeah.
That's really amazing. I was inspired by her from the shared time that we as an audience spent with her. So I can only imagine having spent all that time with her, filming, that experience must have been like. And I'd like to just shift to speak about What the Soul Remembers, which also takes place in a small town in Die Vlakte, now Stellenbosch. Adrian, can you please talk to us about you and Jose's relationship and how you came to be collaborators on this project?
Thanks, Lorato. So Jose and I met in 2014. We basically met through just the joined excitement about storytelling, and Jose's from Cuenca, Ecuador, and I'm from the northern suburbs of Cape Town. So there was already a lot of excitement about the type of storytelling that we were both engaging. We then started writing a feature film script together, which we then completed. But something happened that we were basically drawn to the story of the forced removals that took place in the center of Stellenbosch, of an area called Die Vlakte, which was then subjected to the Group Areas Act of 1950, which was a brutal and devastating policy that the apartheid government enforced. And this was basically the foregrounds for what was the forced removals of what would famously be known as District 6, Sophia Town. This was kind of like the first pet project of the apartheid government. Also, Stellenbosch has a university in the town, and the university is known historically for being the intellectual stronghold of the apartheid government. So 5 out of the 6 apartheid prime ministers all attended Stellenbosch University. So it's a charged environment already, and we then, through no coincidences, but through just the storytelling gods wanted us to meet our participants, who were these amazing group of men who were basically opening up stories to us about these environments. And once we realized that, whoa, for instance, I was attending university there, that the buildings that I'm attending, my university classes, used to be houses of people who were forcefully removed and basically displaced to the outskirts of Stellenbosch town. And we dropped the feature film script. It's still there. It's still in the background somewhere. It's still brewing, A story is never completed. It's only abandoned. So, and we started filming What the Soil Remembers in 2015 as just a project that we wanted to do. It just needed to be done, and the interview and storytelling process needed to happen. And it just led from one thing to the next. And that's the film that is now a 29-minute, 52-second documentary film.
Let's watch a trailer of What the Soul Remembers.
Was daar enige swart families in die vlakte?
Maar ons het nooit vir hulle gesien as swart mense nie. Ons het nie daai tyd gedink aan ras nie. Regtig nie.
The town, the Vlakte, was a place of love.
This looks very interesting. Can you tell us about the style that you chose to tell this story from a cinematographic standpoint?
For sure. I mean, that's the amazing part of having this cross-continental collaboration, because I come from a particular storytelling tradition, and Jose comes from a particular storytelling tradition. And what was the beauty of it was having this collaboration where stylistically, Maria Garcia, who is the cinematographer, along with Jose, the two of them had this really amazing, there was a delicacy about how they handled the story and the image, which I respected a lot and which I really became excited about once we started filming. And so our approach, I think it's very important that we speak about our approach as well, because our approach was to include the elders who are the participants in the story within the editorial process as well. So we brought them into the editing room, and they gave us quite exciting feedback. The feedback was quite honest with us as to how the story is moving and how it feels for them. So, the way in which the archive is treated as well within the film presents it as a glitch. There's a lot of glitch like within the archive and in the editorial as well. There's a lot of glitching within the archive, and that I'll leave up to interpretation of audiences as to how they feel that glitch is represented and what that glitch means as we showcase the archive. The archive was found in various places under, like there was archive found in abandoned rooms, and so we basically also went on like a mission to find different archival representations. So stylistically, it was exciting to see how the film was breaking all rules of form and really intentionally breaking form. I think that was important, especially for the subject matter that the story is engaging with, and how memory actually works, and how memory and the recollection of memory and displaced memory and memory that has been subjected to violence and memory that has been subjected to forms of erasure, and again, relegated to the margins. How do we then treat these memories when we as filmmakers are attempting to put these stories onto a screen, right? So for instance, the tradition that I come from is that we don't necessarily tell stories in a linear manner. We tell stories in a circular way, that the story is open for various interpretations and various mechanisms of bringing that story into the listener's imagination. So these were just some techniques and methodologies that we were working with in collaboration with our participants, who were the storytellers from the community as well. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I have a question. There's a theme of displacement and how that can affect the ability of a family and culture to remain intact, especially like on a mass level. It ends up being up to the individual. And like you said, you ended up bringing in these elders. This is a situation that happened years ago. So yeah. I was interested in what you think what could be a equal reparation for such a loss, especially with these elders who are just in a different place in their life.
Sure. So Imani, I'm not qualified to answer that question because I wasn't the enforcer of the policy. I am the descendant of people that have been displaced. Yeah. I've got some ideas, and I definitely have some very radical ideas as to what equates as enough, and what equates as equal and fair in the face of injustice. However, I'm not someone who can throw around those hypotheticals because I don't have the economic power to do that. So definitely it's those that have benefited from colonial displacement and those that have benefited and have become basically enriched in various ways, not just financially, but quality of life, access to resources, access to educational resources, access to basically, having a quality of life where they can come and go as they want. Those are the individuals that need to be asked that question. Adrian Van Wyk from Kuils River in Cape Town, what I can say is that I'm gonna offer myself as a storyteller to come to these ideas and offer my ideas as a filmmaker to also contribute to this conversation, again, in a way that contributes in a circular way, that we can create a story that allow and create various other stories that brings to life these various moments that people have been displaced. And you cannot explain to someone what the feeling and the shame of displacement is who has never gone through that shame and displacement. So the actual wound of the Group Areas Act in South Africa, for instance, has not been addressed. And it's again correlates to some of the ideas that Julia is dealing with in her film, So this idea of how these displacements have various other side effects, the various other systemic injustices that breed and come to life because of this mass displacement. The Group Areas Act has physically left a scar on South African society. Like literally, you can see it. You can see from the sky who stays where. And that has not been disrupted yet. So our film wants to also bring this idea of what is enough, and also question what enough looks like, because essentially those that have benefited from this colonial displacement, they can't be the ones that dictate what enough is.
I appreciate and I respect your answer, especially, and I think it speaks to the fact that the film takes the time to consider the situation through a spiritual context, which is really where I was heading. Like, is there anything, you know what I'm saying? Like, is there something that could really equate to the loss? So yeah, I appreciate and I definitely respect your answer.
Thank you for asking that question, though.
Sure.
Yeah, and Adrian, you mentioned that you attended Stellenbosch University, and this film was created after you graduated, correct?
No, this film was created while I was supposed to be focusing on my postgraduate studies, but I mean, this was just way more, it was way more important for me to be telling this story.
So then can you talk to us about the experience of attending this university and simultaneously making this film, critiquing it? Like, what was that like still going to class? Did it make you feel angry at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'm walking in a place like Stellenbosch, I mean, the images you just saw there of people living their best lives, you know, quite removed from the reality of the majority of South Africans, you are going to be, it's quite a jarring effect. I mean, also it must be said that this film, we started filming about 2 or 3 weeks before the 2015 student protests, which started with Roads Must Fall, which then evolved into Fees Must Fall. So that was definitely part of the energy. As the student protests were happening, we were continuously filming as well. So the elders then got the motivation to join this and also start asking questions as to, well, this thing happened in the 60s, what has the university done in order to be held accountable? And these ideas were starting to be thrown around about they should give scholarships, but the number of scholarships that the university eventually offered was way short of what was the demand. So I mean, attending Stellenbosch University as a Black person is, I mean, it's like people joke and say, "Hi, my name is Adrian, and I'm a Stellenbosch survivor," because it's like really coming out of that, where you see the systemic injustices, where you see the basically the types of cultures that are intertwined into the university, the types of cultures within the hostels, the types of cultures within the nightlife, the types of things that happen after 8 at night that you see. That's where you're going to be called all types of racist, you know, epithets, where you're going to be called all types of different things. So going there was also, I mean, I feel like this was an exhale for me. This was kind of my therapeutic exhale in making this film alongside Jose.
Thank you, Adrian. I'd like to welcome Norman Maake, who just joined us. Hi, Norman, and sorry for the mix-up with the Zoom link.
No, it's fine. Thank you.
Oh, so just tell us about, you're here to talk about your film Homecoming, which you've done quite a few years ago. But tell us a little bit about it and what motivated you to do the film at the time.
Yeah, so the film is pretty much about 3 ANC MK exiles who are reintegrating their lives back in South Africa in the post-apartheid era. And we're taking the 1976 youth who kind of fled, and they were kind of saying, we're gonna fight for our country, you know? And you know, post-apartheid, we get our freedom. And now the question is, how do you relink your life back, and what does this new South Africa mean to you, and how do you sort of pick up the pieces, because now that you're a man, and go forward with your life, and also how do you deal with the ghosts of what happened in the past. And how I got to do this film, it's actually quite special. So it was written by Zola Maseko, who him and David Max Brown share that, they were part of that MK sort of group. And when the script came to me, it was through Dumisani, who sadly passed away when we were shooting the film. And and he said, Norman, here's a script. At the time I was doing advertising, and he said, get out of advertising, come make some real films. And I was in.
For those people who don't know much about tell us what the MK is.
Yes, so the MK is Mkhonto Wesizwe, which was the armed forces group that was formed during Mandela's time. And it was meant to address the issues, because the liberation struggle was always about, we have to get to peace in South Africa without violence. But the youth within the ANC kind of like were getting tired of that. And there was a feeling that, no, we need to fight to get it back. And the MK was formed under that, where now the youth were tired, because it just felt, apartheid felt like it was never going to end, and we needed a solution. So the young people then fled the country into countries like Zambia, who were willing to help with, organizing them so that they can be ready to fight the apartheid regime.
Thank you. And I wanted to specify for the audience that we actually have a documentary that's called MK, the Mandela's Secret Army, that really gives a very interesting view of the creation of this revolutionary movement that was rooted in violence in order to get rid of apartheid. And it was actually really the brainchild of Mandela himself. So even though people believe that he was all about, nonviolence, etc., at some point he realized that, you needed to do something serious about this. Lerato, you had a question for Norman.
Yes, I did. We were interested in adding this film to the Spotlight on South Africa cinema program because we were interested in the era in South Africa that was the transition period from an apartheid South Africa to a post-apartheid South Africa. And your film did a really great job of capturing that moment in the country where people were hopeful because it was the end of apartheid, but there was also reconciliation happening with family members. There was also mourning because people were finding out about family members that were lost for years and finding out finally what had happened to them. And your film does a great job of balancing all of these moods that were in the country. Can you talk to us about what it was like creating this project during this climate in the country?
So just to give you a bit of context, so we made the film, I think it was 2006. And so that's like maybe a good
like 12
12 years after the era. And you must imagine, South African filmmaking, I always feel we like 10 years behind. And we kind of try to deal with stuff like, oh yeah, we have to talk about that because we don't have films about that era. So so that was like one of the big first challenges, for me it was a gap because I'm not the generation of Zola Maseko who in the 70s were young and went to fled the country to join Mkhonto Wesizwe. In that era I was still 16, 17. And, it's sort of before 94 and Mandela was released, it sort of felt like we are also going to go that direction. But for our generation, it kind of twisted around where, you know, South Africa got its freedom. So I guess a lot of us became filmmakers, you know, because I know Kalo Matabane, you know, that was part of like, oh, we're gonna tell the story of South Africa during that time. So that's my connection to the era. Yeah. I don't know if I've answered your question fully.
Yes, yes, you did. Thank you.
So we're gonna end this conversation soon, and thank you so much for everybody's contribution. And if there's a no question from the audience, now is the time. But I have one question that's general. As Lerato mentioned, we have a program of 15 films in the festival this year that are spotlight on South Africa, past, present, and we have films that are that were filmed during the apartheid era in the 80s. We have films that are during the transition period, and then contemporary films like the one we spoke about earlier today. And the question that we want to discuss, you know, in the end is, what are your thoughts about the evolution of the South African film industry from that time where films were made primarily almost only by white South Africans during apartheid, and then there was an opening for Black filmmakers to make films, and today there's you know, the streaming platforms, there's a lot of money being put into the industry as I understand it. Do you think that there are a lot of opportunities? Do you still see challenges? Are there censorship issues? Just share your thoughts, however you want, about the evolution of the South African industry, and where do you see it going? Anyone?
I will give the mic to my other two fellow filmmakers. I don't think I qualify because I'm not a South African, and I've, as I said, I've been living there for a while, but I would prefer the others to answer on that.
Yeah, I'll take a shot. I think I mean I've been making films now, maybe it's yeah, like 2 decades. And I think I've been through kind of like different moods in South Africa where, you know, things change and then we like, okay, this is what it's gonna be. And I feel right now where we are, there is a lot of optimism of, okay, the world is opening up and a lot of streamers are in the country, and from a commercial point of view, people are ready to kind of be like, oh, these are South African stories. And it feels like a very exciting moment for filmmakers to tell their stories. But at the same time, there's this feeling of, you know, can you tell your story? And for me, that's such an important question, because I see myself as an independent filmmaker. And a lot of times you want to go, hey, this is the story that I want to tell. And in a climate where film starts becoming business, it's very hard not to join the bandwagon. But at the same time, when you are on the bandwagon, it's also like, but I'm a filmmaker. Where's my responsibility in telling films that I want to tell, dealing with society issues? And you also want these films to have a budget. You don't want them to always be these small films where you struggle to get them into mainstream. Yeah, so it's always a struggle for me in South Africa, where I feel like we have amazing stories in this country. But at the same time, I feel in order for us to get there, it's pretty tough, because we don't have that expression yet. And sometimes I feel filmmaking is all about experimentation, where you have your subject matter, you have your theme, and you have your story, and you sort of say, oh, let me go forth with this. And then people will watch that, and you also watch that, and you go, wow, you know, I really expressed something that, you know, that's really unique. And it is a little bit also about, you know, can people fund stories that they don't really know? And for me, that's such an interesting question, because I feel sometimes, you know, the funding, you want to fund a story that you already know because you think there's an audience for it. And, you know, where is that gap for stories that we don't know? Where is that gap of how do we go inside and experiment? How do we bring, you know, jewels out of ourselves?
No doubt. Yeah, I just like to echo Norman there as to there's like, if you want to do this, there's also this tightrope that you sometimes have to balance on, right? As to the type of story that you can tell. However, there's this beautiful moment that is happening where we picking up the camera, right? We understanding also in that picking up of the camera, how the camera has been part of the violence of how we've been depicted across history. The camera is a violent instrument that has been part of the colonial project. Now we coming in as these collectives and these individuals, and we are attempting to break the gaze that has painted us through the viewfinder. We purposefully trying to break that and find new ways of how we want to be remembered and represented. And those modes of representation also then filter into the larger, broader history of third cinema, particularly within the global South, you know, and how this tradition of storytelling, how our grandparents told stories, how that has become an influence for us in the moment of how we're telling stories. And sometimes the stories we're going to tell is not always going to have that thing of like a commercial appeal, but I'm still going to tell that story, and I'm still going to be as punk, as independent, as lo-fi as I can be in telling that story, and getting that story out, because essentially those who will know must know, you know. And so the connection of how we tell stories, also we're in this moment where we're tired of being spoken on behalf of. We're gonna do the talking now, you know. We're gonna tell our own stories. We're going to frame our stories in a particular way. I come from a community that has been violently represented on screen in media over the last 20 years. And now we've said no more. I mean, love stories happen in our communities, you know, like there's drama that happens that is not just affiliated with violence. There's other forms of drama as well. So we're in this beautiful moment, just to echo what Norman is saying, but there's also, we have to be very careful. We have to be very intentional that we don't allow and just run to the highest bidder for our stories. That a contemporary, you know, like a digital scramble for Africa happens again. It can't happen under our watch. We can't allow that to happen. We have to be quite intentional about the way that we make stories, and we have to redefine the cinematic processes, because essentially the way in which cinema and documentary has been made does carry some violence, does carry exploitation, can be exploitative if we're not careful. And we can do that exploitation to each other, to our community members, to our friends, if we are not careful and we don't redefine these processes.
I will also just add, just in looking for South African films for this program and noticing the pattern from, you know, the films that were made during apartheid and the contemporary films, one good thing that's happened is that there's definitely a more diversity in the storytelling, more diversity behind the camera. We had a really difficult time finding Black filmmakers from the apartheid era, and everything post, we were a bit more spoiled for choice. So just to, you know, give something positive about our industry. Yeah.
Okay. There was a question. Go ahead.
Oh.
First of all, you guys have been inspiring this morning listening to you. As a person from an older generation, I'm 73. It is just it makes my heart pound to know that you're picking up the camera in the legacy of third cinema filmmakers. So could I just put on the table to begin with, waiting for the documentary on Zola Maseko, right? That's what we need also, is the documentaries on the filmmakers and the artists themselves. And so if I could just ask, because I'm in California, I can only access the virtual films, and wondered if you could all talk about your distribution, where I can find how your films are being distributed now. I would love to see them and use them in my classes.
Oh, no doubt. So our film will be available via Cinelog, which is a VOD platform from late November. It's titled What the Soil Remembers. And yeah, it's also going to, yeah, it will probably be via Cinelog. That's the VOD platform that will be showcasing our film. And yeah, thank you for your question.
When it comes to DORPIE, we don't have a distributor, but anybody who's interested in screening it can just approach me or the production house, and we just usually send out a link. And also for academic purposes, for community screenings, people who are interested can just use the film, and there is no fee involved or anything.
And we are the distributors of Homecoming. So you can actually go to our website, africanfilm.com.
Okay.
And we can make the film available to you.
Okay.
So this completes, you're welcome. This completes our third Reel Chat. It was, as usual, very enjoyable, very informative, and I appreciate you, Lerato and Imani, for preparing your questions and being part of the conversation. And I appreciate you, Norman and Adrian and Julia, for being kind enough to accommodate us with all the changes and all the challenges of organizing something that's like cross continent. So thank you so much. And thank you for sharing your films with our audience. We are looking forward to the films, by the way, are showing on Friday. Homecoming, they're screening this Friday, this first day of the festival at Teachers College Columbia University. Check out our website, nyadiff.org, for all the details. So thank you very much and have a great continuation. Bye-bye.
Thanks for the invite. Bye.